Everyone. Hope you're all well and got a nice array of agenda items tonight to keep us all busy. Just a couple of points. One is we haven't got the air conditioning on at the moment, so it causes too much noise usually. If anyone without a jacket is overheating, then we'll probably put the AC on. But other than that, just tell me, just call out or whatever. As usual, remind everyone to talk into the microphones as clearly as possible. And on that note, first agenda items is the appointment of a vice chair for 26-27. And I think, have we got a nomination for the vice chair? Previously, it was Sue Nichols. Maura?
I'd like to propose Sue Nichols.
Sue Nichols again. Do we have a seconder for that, for Sue Nichols? Come on. Bob, thank you very much. Can I please have a show of hands for Sue Nichols? For those who vote? Oh, yes, so that's unanimous. So we now have the same deputy as we had previously. So Sue Nichols is the vice chair. Thank you, everyone. Apologies for absence.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've got apology from Councillor Sue Nichols and Councillor Connolly is substituting, and also from Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Jacobs is substituting, and also from both the independent members, that's Mark Bobby, Nick Sharman.
Thank you very much. Next agenda item, the minutes of the 24th of February. Hopefully the few of us in the room that were at that meeting, I think that's probably you, Bob. And Chris, hopefully you've read it, but can I have a proposer and a seconder for those minutes? Bob?
I've just got a comment on the minutes, actually, very unusual for me, but it's because I feature. On page 15, I think there's unless I've missed it, on page 15, there's a reference to the question I asked Brian in relation to the understaffing of the planning department. And I think the minutes should record that I asked that question and that Brian said he would provide me with a response. And to be very straightforward, the reason I think the minutes should record that clearly is because I only received the response, a week ago. So it's taken several months for that response to come through.
Certainly, Bob. Yes, if you can, yeah. So yes, are you proposing them on that basis?
Subject to that, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I'm happy to propose. Yeah.
Thank
Does
you.
that mean I have to second as well? Since
I think Chris may be able to do that. You second, Chris. Yeah.
Okay, with that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's it because no one else was at the meeting. So on that basis, we've accepted those minutes. Oh, we do still have to vote. So could you two please vote? That's thank you. That's carried. Well, yes, abstentions. Yes. Those that weren't here, do you wish to abstain? 1, 2, 3. Yes. So 3 abstentions. Thank you very much. That's carried. We now have another set of minutes, which I think we're all going to be struggling to agree who was there. That is the minutes of the joint meeting of scrutiny committees on the 28th of January, where we discussed the budget. Could someone please propose and second those minutes? Yes, I've been told I can propose. Given that, I will propose that we accept these minutes. And is there a seconder? What do we do? Oh, Chris, you were there. Yes. So could we please vote for those minutes? That's 3, 4. Those against and abstentions, and 3 abstentions. That is carried. Thank you very much. Chairman's announcements. Now, this is an unusual meeting because we have a few substitutes. We have 2 substitutes, Maura and David, and welcome. And we also have 2 new members, of which one's not here. So Tom Deffley, welcome on board, and you're but obviously very welcome here anytime. But now you're a voting member, so and you can ask questions. You know, take the lead or whatever in whatever direction you want. I generally don't do the follow-up questions or whatever. The assumption is that you will keep asking until you've got what you want. So, okay, thank you. The other item I need to tell you about is that we have another absence today, which an agenda item is going to be pulled. Now, I've discussed this with Brian. This is the agenda item 8, the external auditor's audit plan. So the assets people can't make it today. A draft document is included, but the full document's not included. So the suggestion is that we leave this and pick this up in September when we meet next. So I don't, unless you have any other any comments relating to that, we will do that. No, you're all fine. Okay. So on that basis, we're shelving agenda item 8 this meeting. Declarations of interest. Is there any declarations of interest relating to the agenda items tonight? So given the fact that we've got both Beam and everyone active, I will have to declare that I am a member of Grange Paddock's Everyone Active, but that shouldn't deter me from asking any sort of probing questions. So no declarations of interest. Then we'll go on to the next item then. Annual leisure contract performance report. I think this is you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. The 15-year contract with SLM began in 2020 and is now in its 7th year. The report in front of you highlights some of the key achievements and developments across the East Herts Council-owned leisure centres over the previous year. Of particular note, both Grange Paddocks and Hartham Leisure Centre underwent improvements, with Hartham receiving upgrades to its changing village and a new reformer Pilates studio, and Grange Paddock seeing the replacement of gym equipment and the introduction of a virtual aqua class offering, which has already proven to be popular. Both centres have also continued to adjust their fitness programmes to ensure a varied programme of virtual and instructor-led classes. As well as providing excellent leisure facilities, the report before you highlights some of the ways in which Everyone Active has been working with the wider community through strong partnership working. These have included working with Alzheimer's Society UK, Heart Sports Partnership, Weight Watchers, and with local primary care networks. This highlights the continued commitment to supporting all residents across to access health and wellbeing opportunities. I'll now hand over to Dan Humphreys, who has a presentation for you. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Apologies, there's a lot of information in here, so if you need me to stop or pause, just let me know as we go through. Hopefully if you have the opportunity to look at this and when it's been sent through. So we've kind of highlighted the leisure contract works in calendar years. So the presentation we've got is from 2025. One of the key things that we talk about is social value, the impact that we've got. We sign up to the Moving Communities scheme, which is a nationally recognised leisure benchmarking scheme for social value calculation. This year we've seen that increase ever so slightly by £188,000 to £6.9 million. We've seen that social value per person increase by £22 to £179. Most importantly is the number of unique users. So whereas this reflects on 2024, when we would have had Fanshawe and Leaventhorpe part of that, we've seen a slight drop in that total by about 3.9%. If we focus only looking at Grange Paddock and Hartham, actually that's an increase of 2,400 in terms of unique users going. As Sarah very eloquently said, in terms of our links with the local community, we were with 138 different partnerships, 43 local schools, 22 health groups for exercise referrals, and 72 different groups in terms of our dry side activities. Part of what we offer as well is a Sporting Champions programme. At the moment, last year we had 26 on that scheme, and this year that's gone up to 33 young adults that are aspiring to be elite level performers get free access to our centres. We're seeing as part of that supported membership, we offer 193 memberships to Parkinson's sufferers, of which we link up with Hertfordshire County Council, where we've got 13 people that are part of the Cared Experience scheme and 13 people that are children that are in a care scheme that get free access to our centres. Well, that's not worked on the first go. Next slide, please. Who needs IT when you've got it? In terms of people, participation exceeded over 1.5 million. Whilst that is down, the data that does include the comparison from 2024 includes those dual use sites. If we look at year on year, it's actually a 3.1% increase, which is 45,000 more people. From a swim perspective, we've seen a slight drop. Again, levelling that out, so we're comparing the same sites at Hartham and Grange. That's down by about 2,000 visits, which is just over 1%. In terms of the Learn to Swim programme, and we've seen just over 1,522 people achieve that key stage 2 level mark of getting to 25 metres and above. We've seen increases in the BME participation. One of the things that we're most proud of this year is seeing that increase in terms of disability groups. And as we talk about the things that we do in terms of a community perspective, you'll see there's a variety of different programs that we've added into our offering that drive into that. Sarah also spoken about the increase in terms of Reformer Pilates. We've also introduced HydroHex, which is a virtual group exercise offering for Aqua. Overall, we've seen that participation increase by 15.8% in terms of group exercise, which is an increase of just under 30,000 visits. Gym attendances likewise have increased. We've had the gym refurb at Grange Paddock as well, which have supported that. So on the next slide, we'll talk very briefly around total participation. You'll get an idea in terms of what that looks like. So overall, whilst that participation is down from 2024, that balance is that when you take the data out from the dual use sites that are obviously not in the 25 data, we kind of see that it's still an uplift of 40,000 visits. On the next slide, part of our key performance indicators are a breakdown of usage by site. And we break that down looking in terms of key aspects in terms of what we're doing. Overall, we've kind of seen that year on year, comparing it to what we've got with the sites that we've got, going from 4 sites to 2 sites, it does give us a slight loss in terms of participation. On the next slide is our target use participation, which does come across very small. So I will do my level best to kind of summarise that participation in various different forms is increasing in terms of what we've got. On the next slide is a summary in terms of our operational performance standards. So from a health and safety perspective, we'll talk about accidents per 10,000 visits. Our corporate objective is around 4.5 accidents per 10,000 visits. We're well under that. We saw a slight increase last year, but nothing to be too concerned about. From a feedback perspective, we also look at the same metric in terms of how many feedbacks we get per 10,000 visits. And again, there was a slight increase last year. So we focused in terms of making sure that we capture as much information from our customers as we can. From a colleague development perspective, we also talk a lot in terms of making sure that our colleagues are trained in terms of understanding hidden disabilities and understanding mental health. And we've got a lot of programs in terms of what we do with our teams to make sure that they are well trained in terms of how to identify and deal with the various different communities that we interact with. In terms of local colleagues, 91% of our colleagues live within 20-minute drive time of their sites. We're in a situation predominantly our staffing levels are female. From an expenditure perspective, we spent roughly 10% of all of our spending in East Herts, and across Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire and Essex, we spent 25% of our money. From a utility perspective, we did see a slight increase in terms of our benchmarking of kilowatts per square metre. Mainly that's down to some challenges that we've had with the air source heat pump at Hartham and the CHP at Grange. On the next slide, we'll talk about our aquatics attendances. Next one. Yeah. So in terms of aquatics, one of the things that we spoke about is that reduction in terms of the facilities that we now operate. If you look at that in terms of the second column on the right, the second column on the left, that's the balance without looking at the data from 2024, which included the dual use sites. So where sites unfortunately were closed at Fanshawe and Leaventhorpe,
we've had to rejig that programme. So we have seen some reductions in under 16 swimming and a slight reduction in terms of adult swimming. Overall, what we have seen is an increase in over 60 swimming. So there's a slight balancing out. Whilst we've accommodated timetable changes to make that happen, what we have seen is we have seen more people on our Learn to Swim programme. On the next slide is something a little bit less data driven, where it's an understanding in terms of what we've delivered over that period. We spoke about the HydroHex. We're one of, I think, 13 sites in the UK that have got this virtual aqua. There's a massive demand in terms of people being able to access that. At Grange Paddocks, we've got the benefit that the pool's got the movable floor. So at various different times, we can manoeuvre that pool floor down and they can participate in the 3 or 4 different ranges that HydroHex does. We've introduced more spaces for adult swimming lessons. We've also focused in terms of making sure that swimming becomes fun. So there's more inflatable sessions. And again, at Grange Paddocks, every year we have a group that come from a local school that raise thousands of pounds as part of the local swimathon. On the next slide is the fitness attendances, where you can kind of see in terms of that, again, that balance in terms of what we've got. We saw a slight reduction in terms of the total comparison, but when we look at that, looking at the data against Hartham and Grange, it's actually a slight increase in terms of what we've got. Group exercise, as I've already said, has grown significantly over that period, and in that data, you can kind of see the impact over the time and the investments that have gone into facilities of what level of growth that's led to in terms of increased participation. On the next slide, we talk about membership participation and our Learn to Swim scheme. So in terms of that, again, part of the challenge that we've got is that when we report the data, it would be remiss of us not to include the data that we would have had at the dual use sites. So from a membership perspective, it is down by 3%. So those are some of the members that haven't migrated across the Grange Paddocks from Leventhorpe and vice versa from Hartham to Fanshawe. In terms of that Learn to Swim programme, we're in that situation that ultimately there were about 1,100 swimmers that were offered places that came across. Not all of those came across, which is why those scheme numbers year on year appear to be down. In terms of the next slide, there's a brief summary in terms of our staffing. One of the things that we pride ourselves on as an organisation is in terms of developing our colleagues. We were in a situation that we trained 27 new lifeguards last year, of which they all came from the local community that we gave free space to. We've also seen 3 apprentices start with us. And then on the next slide, we'll talk about our customer insight. So one of the things that we do after every visit, hopefully when Martin visits Grange Paddocks next, he'll get a survey which will ask him how his service was. We'll see a breakdown in terms of what that looks like. What we've seen over the last couple of years is because that's an anonymous situation, people get the opportunity to ask that very critically. We've seen a few changes in terms of fitness experience and value for money. Some of that has been affected by price increases over a period of time. Visitor satisfaction dipped slightly along with the NPS score in terms of what that looked like. We've also seen a slight increase in terms of customers travelling to the centre via active travel means. And from a cleanliness satisfaction perspective, that increased. On the next slide is a little bit more information in relation to that social value element. It gives you a broader perspective in terms of if you want to see that impact in terms of what came from the dual use sites. That social value in terms of that 6.9 million is then broken down by social value participants. And then on the next slide, it's broken down into 4 different characteristics in terms of physical and mental health, subjective well-being, individual development, and community and social development. One of those things that does is that takes into consideration that unfortunately not everybody that exercises doesn't get an injury or might not necessarily need to see a physio, but you'll see a breakdown in terms of how that's worked out from there. On the next slide, one of the more key things is that we've seen that breakdown in terms of the number of social value participants increase. So you'll see in that 3rd column at the top, the activity level breakdown by active and fairly active. It'll come to no surprise that if you're active, obviously your social value increases. So the people that are active and are using the centre 3 to 4 times a week, their social value per person goes up to £443. Whilst people that are under that active level, it's slightly less than what we've got. On the next slide, we give you a summary in terms of some of our fitness activities. There's some images around the Reformer Pilates launch at Hartum. One of the things that we did, and ironically we did it last week on the summer solstice, was the sunrise yoga session. A big focus in terms of making sure that we can make a community feel in terms of what people get involved with from a group exercise perspective. Whilst on the next slide, there's a degree of things that we've covered in terms of young people. So whether that's arts and crafts sessions, whether that's the soft play timetable that we've got, whether that's an Easter program, we've also had an ethical zoo visit the centre as well and put on a session as well. On the next slide, there's obviously a focus in terms of what we do for older adults. So a big focus in terms of well-being, making sure that we focus in terms of things like perimenopause, International Men's Health Day, International Women's Health Day, and a situation that we now do 9 sessions out into the community. So, for example, at Lee Wharf, we'll be in a situation on the next slide where there'll be a breakdown in terms of what we do in terms of some of those sessions. So at Lee Wharf, over the summer months, we do a healthy walks program for new and expectant parents. This is driven off the fact that they have a midwife there on that particular day, and as part of that session, we encourage those people that are new or expecting mothers to interact with people, do a short walk around Hartum Column, and then come back to Lee Wharf, which is a great way of just integrating people to remain healthy and active. And it helps that particular primary care network be in a situation to kind of bring more people in. On the next slide, we talk very briefly about our Sporting Champions programs. In terms of the following slide, we talk very briefly in terms of the investment that we're putting over the last, in 2025 in relation to what we've invested into the centre. So Sarah highlighted the gym change at Grange Paddocks, the Change Village at Hartum, and the Reformer Pilates Studios. On the next slides, there are some nice slides to kind of talk through what the HydroHex programme is, what the gym and studio developments now look like at Grange Paddocks. And on the following slides, we cover very quickly what we did at Hartum in relation to the Change Village refurbishment and the investments in the Reformer Studio. Previously, I've waffled on for hours and hours. So I have been on the strict 15-minute deadline, and I think I've come in at 30 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's very good. Thank you.
Are there any questions at all?
Yeah. Questions, comments, Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Look, it's very clear to me that these are very, very well run facilities, and they provide, an unmatched service really in East Hart. So I was so pleased to see this report. It's very positive. I'm a bit stuck on your first KPI slide because it was a sea of red. I'm not actually sure what the title of the slide was because you went through it quite quickly. Should we be worried about that, or is that just a business as usual type?
So it's the second slide, which is the target users and key activities, which is very small. So part of that data, we have to report year-on-year attendances. So I'm sure Emily and Sarah are quite bored of reading my client reports that point out that we're looking at 4 sites against 2 sites. So where we've got that data, we've not excluded the data from the dual use sites to provide a like-for-like comparison, which is why some of those KPIs on target participation look like a sea of red. In reality, looking at Hartum and Grange in isolation, they're very positive. There's a slight balance around swimming, but that's mainly down to the fact that certainly when we were in that unfortunate situation that the dual use sites closed at Fanshawe and Leventhorpe, we needed to rejig the timetable to provide spaces for those people that are on the swim schemes to see whether they could come across.
Can I just ask, just one more thing about the refurb at Grange Paddocks, the gym? That seems quite early in the life of that gym. Am I wrong about that? And what happened? Did you resell the equipment, or what actually happened? What was the business case for it? Just curious.
Okay. Typically, we will do gym refurbishments every 4 to 5 years. So we're kind of in a situation. Grange Paddocks opened September 21. So we're kind of in that period where in terms of the work that took place last summer, we kind of got to that point. Grange Paddocks is a hugely popular gym in terms of what we've got. We're in a situation that we felt that needed 4 years, not 5 years. In relation to the developments we put into the group exercise space, if I'm honest, some of those things we're just ironing out so that we could get some more extra spaces into some of those classes. And the HydroHex, we spoke to them probably 18 months before, but weren't in a situation to commit to that. So we put a case and we saw what other work had happened in places like Hemel Hempstead and at London Aquatics to realise that that could answer a question for us.
Any more questions or comments, Chris?
I just have a couple actually. Thank you for the report. Actually, it was very comprehensive. I kind of had a bit of a problem trying to keep track of all the slides at the beginning, so I just want to pull up on the swimming numbers because I think it was kind of recognised when we closed Fanshawe and Leverhulme that we might have a drop off in our ability to provide swimming lessons to young people. I noticed you say there has been a 3% drop off because not all the children could be accommodated when the facilities they previously used were closed. Do we have any means of addressing that, or do we know what happened to that group? Because although it doesn't seem like a very big number, that's 3 in every 100 children that may not learn to swim, which is quite a high number.
So it's a difficult one to answer, if I'm honest, to be honest, because you're in a situation that one of the things that, so I won't answer it directly at the start. So one of the things that we find with swimming lessons is that there is a degree of competency and confidence. So people and children can be confident in the water up to about stage 4, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're competent to swim if they got into difficulty. So what we tend to find is that when people get past that key stage 6, which is swimming 25 meters, if we give that parent the opportunity perhaps to do something else, football or something else takes over. So I think in one of my slides, we've kind of said that there was about 1,100 swimmers, or sorry, there were 658 swimmers that were given that opportunity to come across. Now, in essence, what we found is the dynamics, the people that moved across from Grange Paddocks or from Leventhorpe to Grange Paddocks were mainly the ones that weren't at that confident swimming level. So what we found is it's a difficult one to answer because individually, without looking at every one of those people that didn't come across, they may well have then gone off to different swim schemes around there.
I mean, I know it's like complicated because I know you do a lot of partnership organisation, particularly with primary schools, and I wondered if we've got any way of kind of trying to capture what did actually happen in terms of, you know, making sure that young people that previously were able to use facilities at Fanshawe do have the opportunity to move across, and we're encouraging that. I mean, as I say, some of them may have disappeared into using, I know, Nuffield Health, for instance, who offer swimming lessons, or
I think the point that I'm saying is that some of the children that didn't come across were in the higher levels of that scheme.
okay.
So there were a number of children at that age which would have been able to swim 25 meters, which would have been confident in the water, but not necessarily competent.
No,
And the bulk that we found, and we kind of still see that operational legacy now, is that the children that are in the stage 2s, which can do some stroke recognition, but are not yet ready to kind of get into swimming distances, were the ones that kind of mainly migrated across. So we found that they got to an ability, but after that ability, they kind of felt like they'd learnt to swim, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering how we managed to keep them going, because obviously we want them to be able to keep themselves going if they got into difficulty, because obviously that's the point of learning to swim, is that you could get yourself out of difficulty. So I just wondered, do we have a way of doing that? Is there anything we can offer?
So one of the things that I've not said is that in the end of June, so in the middle weeks of June, we work with the Royal Life Saving Society around the swim safe and drowning prevention week. There's an acronym that float to live, isn't it? We've obviously not read our marketing as well as we should have done there, so that'll be a warning from me tomorrow morning. But we get out into local schools and we'll do that. So I know my own child is in the swim scheme at Hartham. In that particular fortnight, they do, as part of that drowning prevention week, they do identification of what beach flags mean, how they float to stay alive if they get into difficulty. So it's kind of built into that kind of reactive planning in terms of what we do as part of an aquatics delivery operator.
Sounds really good. Can I just ask one more question? It's a very brief question, and maybe it's slightly unfair, but I was looking at the customer satisfaction, and we kind of hover. It's again, it's about 80% at Hartham. I can't remember what it was now for Grange Paddocks, which is a kind of, we have a 20% of numbers of people who are feel it's either average or dissatisfied? I notice the numbers being people dissatisfied is actually quite small. But is there, do we, you know, people who think it's just average may not come back? And I'm just wondering, do we have a way of being kind of so that we kind of increase the revenue? Because obviously if we're losing revenue from other places because people aren't migrating across from places that have closed, do we have a way of improving, finding out what it is that they dislike and kind of improving it so we kind of get a bit,
So
retain more people?
as Councillor definitely pointed out, you know, we changed the kit at Grange Paddocks. Unfortunately, we're in a situation that leads to a degree of disruptions to people's lives, because for a period of time we might need to close the gym for up to a week to 10 days to deliver some of those works. The same at Harton when we've needed to revamp the Change Village. Now, we felt the Change Village that was built as part of the original project wasn't robust enough to deliver what we needed it to do. So we've invested further money into those areas to try and deliver that. There are some aspects where, from a customer satisfaction perspective, when we've got disruptive things like build projects and we're revamping change rooms, where as a parent, it's great because my child gets changed in the car, comes out, goes out, doesn't budge with me for anything. I probably shouldn't talk about sugary drinks, but it's secondary spend and commercial revenue. Some of those things, sometimes people, it leads to dissatisfaction by trying to improve and enhance the services that we've done. So I guess in terms of that investment that we've put in, some of that's to try and drive that. I think we're in a situation, there are a number of inherent challenges around car parking across both sites that, you know, we're in a situation we need to encourage as many people to try and drive or be responsible car share when we do that. But we're in a situation that it's a very popular and busy service in terms of what we offer, and sometimes we don't get it right, and where we do, we'll correct that with those customers and make sure that we give them a positive experience.
I mean, it sounds like actually, I'm kind of, you know, sounds like I'm being unfair, because in actual fact, obviously you're doing remarkably well. And I suspect that people who are customers are actually fairly tolerant of changes that need to happen. Nearly every major leisure facility has to do refurbishment at some point or another, and customers are actually quite tolerant of those things happening. I imagine that really the people that are dissatisfied is either because the offer isn't good enough, or it's too expensive, or for what they're looking for, rather than that they're dissatisfied that there are refurbishments going on, because the satisfaction things kind of, although I could see there was a significant dip this year, that they stay kind of fairly at the same level all the way through. It's just that it is doing so well, really, that you kind of think there's probably something that, you know, it probably could attract more people into it. It's a fantastic resource, it really is, and so much money and time and effort from the staff and community involvement's gone on to make it as good as it is. I wonder if we had a chance to get more people through the door.
But that's why we're diversifying, to try and go out to these GP surgeries, because we're in a situation that people have done the gym in inverted commas, been swimming. One of the things that we look at a lot in our data is trying to make sure that people are doing different types of activity. So it's not just the gym, it's not just swimming. And one of the things that we find is that customers' length of stay, in terms of how long they stay a member, increases depending on which activity they do, which is why we've invested more money into group exercise, because Martin was telling me, I hope he won't mind, about his body balance class. That can't wait. That class starts at 10 o'clock. You know, it's not the gym that you could push back 10 minutes, 15 minutes and I haven't been today. You know, so I think it's just focusing in terms of what we're doing to try and drive those activities that we know that keep customers engaged. There's a massive thing around social inclusion as well. So one of the things that we're trying to do is, rather than being a gym, is to be a wellbeing hub, which is why we're talking more about health awareness and then looking at different markets. One of the things that we've learned over the last 18 months working with Lee Wolf is there were people that would have never joined a gym until we went there and delivered seated exercise classes. Now, upwards of about 15 or 20 of them now come for a swim session.
Okay, thank you very much. David, you want to ask?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few questions about on the general topic of equality. I'll put them all at once or drip feed them through. Okay. You mentioned social inclusion in that last answer. To what extent do you think the gyms being cashless has an impact on social inclusion, or do you think it might potentially exclude certain socio-economic groups? That's the first one. Second one, one of the slides said that you'd had a 60% increase year on year in attendance by people with a disability. There's obviously a story there. That's not just a general steady tick up. We normally take notes, but yeah, go for it. Okay.
In terms of cashless, we've been that way now for 6 years. I'm sure there are some people that's an impact to. When we've done our quality assessments, we don't believe that was a huge impact, but we recognise that for some people that is an impact for some people. Your second question was about disability groups and that increase.
60%
Yeah.
year on year.
So in terms of doing that, we've seen exercise referrals increase significantly in that period. One of the things that we've done from a data perspective is that we now ask on a 6 monthly basis that customers and colleagues update their account should their health conditions or personal circumstances change. So we're seeing a benefit in terms of better data. So for example, if I joined Everyone Active 15 years ago, my health conditions wouldn't be the same as what they are now. So that evolution of time in terms of, I think this is now our 15th year in the contract. So some of that, if I'm honest, is an improvement in data, but also an improvement in terms of how we're getting out and delivering that. So one of the things that we started this year was a cancer prehab session, and we've also introduced a pulmonary rehabilitation session. So some of those naturally are going to see an increase in terms of those things, but an improvement in data capture is also a part of that.
Third question on that topic. It was on a slide that flashed through quite quickly, but did I read it correctly? Your leadership profile has got 1 woman out of the 20 senior managers. That seems remarkably slow for a female-led organisation that you described.
I definitely need to double check that stat because there's definitely more than that. Yeah, no, you're right. That's incorrect. I'm trying to top that up in my mind, but it's roughly 50-50. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it should say 10. Unfortunately, I'll write the report in. Yeah, because I appreciate that does look awful.
Okay. Are you okay there, David? Yeah. Any more questions or comments around the table? Bob?
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to say firstly what you would expect me to say, which is that as the Conservative group, we're obviously really pleased that Grange, Paddocks and Hartham are doing so well, given, as you know, the investment that we directed into those facilities. But I do just want to add that it's always a delight listening to your presentations. There's a huge amount of science that goes into this, and we just get a little inkling of it, don't we, when you come and present to us, and it's very, very interesting. We're very grateful to you for the work that you do. And my last comment, and forgive me if I've missed something, but I don't see the slides in the paper pack or the pack that were circulated for this meeting. To be frank, I found it a bit difficult to read those slides. Could the slides be circulated to the committee after this meeting, please?
Are you okay with that, Dan?
There's no commercial data in there, so
Yeah,
that's absolutely
thank
fine.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. If there's no more comments or questions, then we'll take this to vote. The recommendation, there's a single recommendation to review and receive the annual leisure contract performance report 2025 as set out by the service leisure provider below, which I believe this is part of it. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder? Proposer, thank you, Tom, and a seconder, Bob. Thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, and carried. Do you want to hang around, or do you want to? You make a move? Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll go straight on to agenda item 9 now. Miss out 8, as I mentioned before. The annual assurance statement and internal audit report. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Now for something completely different. This annual report summarises internal audit activity.
So, sorry, Simon, can you move it a
Is
bit
it not?
closer, thanks?
Is that better?
That's it, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, this annual report summarises internal audit activity and outcomes for 2025-26, bringing it all together under an annual assurance opinion at page 90 of your report pack. The reasonable assurance opinion reflects a largely positive position and a similar position to that reported last year. Further details of individual audit opinions and recommendations are provided in the tables at page 93, including comparisons with last year and in the supporting appendix starting at page 98. There's quite a lot of narrative in the report. In summary, it describes what internal audit does, how it does it and why. The report also shows the framework of quality assurance that is implied to how internal audit operates, and some explanation of the global internal audit standards against which we're reporting general compliance for the year. There is also content at page 95 that shows how the service fared against its performance indicators for last year, which were met without exception. There are also details of the main service developments that took place, such as securing business that generated income from outside of Hertfordshire. There is an audit charter for 2026-27 starting at page 106. That document is essentially a terms of reference or mandate for internal audit. For example, it sets out the authority and responsibilities that the service has. The charter is reviewed and approved annually by this committee. You may like to note that it's essentially unchanged from last year, apart from one paragraph, paragraph 6.3, which references the opportunity for member involvement in overseeing the role of the Council's internal audit manager. Why is that there, you may think? Well, that change is being driven by the new global internal audit standards, which includes that as a requirement. Most of the agenda item is for noting, except for the charter, which members are asked to approve. There is also a technical requirement for management to confirm or otherwise to the committee that the scope and resources of internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 2025-26. The committee's lead officer traditionally provides that response when asked to do so by the committee chair. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions, should there be any.
Certainly. Bob, Brian, do you want to make the comment now around the assurance, the management assurance that the scope and resources for internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 25-26?
I can confirm that is correct. There's been no limitations placed upon internal audit in 25-26.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments around the table? Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Yeah, it's good. I just wondered about some of the terminology in here. For instance, the annual assurance statement 25-26. It's got a reasonable assurance, it says, but I'm assuming that there's a level higher than that, substantial assurance, which from reading these documents. So do we push for that? And if we do, how do we do it? How do we get ourselves to that higher sort of level?
Yeah, I guess that overall annual opinion is, to put it crudely, an aggregation of all of the reports issued during the year. It's partly a numbers game, but we have to look at the outcomes as well. So you've got substantial assurance, reasonable assurance, limited assurance, and heaven forbid, no assurance. Reasonable assurance is fairly typical of the outcome for East Herts and most of the SIAS partners. To get to substantial, the council would need to drive up the average, if you like, outcome of the internal audit reports that are issued during the year. So you need more substantial audit opinions.
Any more comments or questions, Tom?
Yeah, if I may, to Chair, just one more thing I did notice, and obviously we're going to go on to talk about this shortly, but on page 15, which I think is Appendix A, the operational areas, BEAM wasn't assessed as part of this. So I'm wondering if you are going to do that, when you might do it. That's all.
Yes, we're actually due to kick off a piece of work in what we describe as Q2, July to September. In that period, we'll issue an internal audit report with an assurance opinion.
Thank you very much. Any more for any more? No? Well, that is good. Well, thank you very much, Simon. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder? Anyone? Tom, proposer and seconder around the table? Bob, could I please have a show of hands, those in favour of accepting the recommendations? Thank you. That is unanimous and carried. I assume you want to stay at all? Oh yeah, yeah. It's up to you whether you want to. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Yes. So the next one, big item, Sarah, BEAM.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight's paper provides information on performance and the financial position of BEAM for the financial year 2025 to 2026. With Studio 2 opening in March 2025, the recent financial year provides the clearest picture of what has and hasn't worked for the venue. It also provides empirical data to inform an updated business plan, which will form part of tonight's discussion. As you will be aware from the paper, BEAM's year-end position at the end of March 2026 was a net loss of 970,000 with 440,000 in future ticket sales for the year 26 to 27. This clearly falls significantly short of the 200,000 profit that was suggested in the business plan provided by independent sector experts in 2024. However, I want to be clear that this position in no way reflects the work of the staff and volunteers at BEAM, all of whom have worked exceptionally hard and gone over and above to help ensure a positive experience for all of BEAM's visitors. There are several factors that have influenced BEAM's performance, including the impact of external factors such as the changing behaviours after COVID and wider cost of living pressures. However, ultimately, the business plan was overly optimistic, both in terms of how quickly a new venue could build its audience and the timeframe for attracting high-performing national shows. Since Steve joined the team in January 2025, he has worked tirelessly on both areas, as well as looking at opportunities to best manage the venue's costs. There has also been considerable work put into a new website which was launched in February this year, and the paper highlights the positive impact this has since had on ticket sales and income. Part of building new and returning audiences included testing different shows to understand what works for the area. This inevitably meant that some shows did not return a profit, but this in turn has provided valuable insights for future programming. And, having now been fully open for several months, BEAM is in a much stronger position to attract bigger shows, including the recent performance of Blood Brothers, which was hugely successful. Compared to other established venues, BEAM is very much still in its growth stage, and the updated business plan forecasts reflect this, with breaking even expected for 2028-2029. I will now hand over to Steve Sargent, who will provide a short presentation on the venue's performance and updated business plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopewell. Thank you, committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight on our path towards financial sustainability for BEAM. I am conscious that members will undoubtedly have questions, so I will keep this presentation short to facilitate that. Thank you. So to start with the scale of activity over the last financial year, so we delivered over 3,100 ticketed events, welcomed more than 77,000 people to live stage performances and over 53,000 to film screenings. We also saw strong local engagement with over 85,000 tickets sold to East Herts residents and over 12,000 children and young people participating in cultural experiences. Importantly, over a third of our stage audiences and nearly a quarter of our cinema audiences were first-time visitors, showing our growing reach. Thank you. So despite the strong activity, our first full year resulted in a significant loss. This is enormously disappointing, but it is not reflective of a single issue. It is reflective of complex early stage challenges. Over the last year, and in response to the changing marketplace, we implemented a structured action plan focused on 3 areas: revenue optimization, cost efficiency, and risk management. This has guided every major decision over the last year. The plan to date has not been a series of isolated decisions. It represents a coherent shift to a commercially disciplined, risk-managed operating model. But we have had a lot of ground to make up, and we are only now starting to feel the positive impact of those changes. Those positive impacts include significant growth in booking and transaction fees, which are up nearly 74%, spend per head in our cafe bars, which is up 19%. Our stage occupancy percentage is up 12%, and our screen occupancy percentage is up 26%. Now, those comparisons are between Q3 and Q4, 24-25 versus 25-26, where we have comparable data. Thank you. The work to continue growing Beam is ongoing, and we have seen the growth trend continue into this financial year. So we're almost at the end of Q1 now, and the early stage forecasts show that we have seen nearly 60% growth across stage attendance compared to this time last year, 12% growth in cinema attendance, ticketing commissions up 30%, and overall food and beverage income up 36%. So that's Q1 this year compared to Q1 last year. There is no doubt that we have a long way to go, but the growth signs are there and they are strong. So looking ahead, we've developed a business plan that targets a break-even position by financial year 28-29. This plan responds to a much tougher trading environment than a few years ago any of us predicted. Industry data shows that the arts and culture sector is being compressed by rapidly rising costs, with almost a third of established organisations forecasting operating deficits, and 75% of respondents reporting touring conditions as poor or very poor. So this plan is grounded in realism as well as ambition. Thank you. The cinema sector is facing similar challenges. BFI data shows that attendance is still around 30% lower than pre-pandemic levels and hasn't recovered. That ongoing reduction directly impacts our film programme and income potential for Beam. Thank you. So the new plan is built around the challenging context within which we now find ourselves. In writing this plan, we developed an approach that uses multiple data sources to create a plan that is ambitious and achievable in the current context. Thank you. So, importantly, this new plan is underpinned by detailed financial modelling across all areas of Beam, and there is a snapshot of that here in this calculator. So this calculator is an example calculator for the food and beverage area. So SPH in the top left of that table references spend per head. So that is how much money each individual ticket buyer is spending in addition to their ticket purchase. And you can see the clear growth from this year onwards. That then calculates the overall income from spend per head by linking with an occupancy calculator that sits elsewhere in the business plan. Catering income in this table references additional food-specific income through catering, conferencing, and events. So it's separate to the day-to-day. And party packages, again, are a new strand whereby additional food and beverage is upsold through upsold for kind of higher packages for things like cinema for parties. There's prior year data there, so financial year 24-25, we achieved £3.94 spend per head. That grew to £4.09 last year. Year to date this year, we are achieving £5.09. Okay, thank you. So because the model's dynamic, it gives us the ability to test different scenarios. For instance, increasing average ticket price by just £2 would improve our overall position by around £58,000. Because of the calculators that underpin the business plan, we're able to deliver a number of different scenarios, and they have given us parameters for challenging, expected, and strong performance. Thank you. So to close, the past year has been about building a strong operational and financial foundation whilst continuing to trade. That work has been intensive, but we are now starting to see tangible financial improvements. The next key step is strengthening our financial reporting through dedicated accounting resource. This will ensure more informed decision making, and it will prevent future financial shocks. With that resource in place, we will be very well positioned to continue this level of growth and deliver on this plan to reach financial sustainability. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Steve. I must admit, that is a very good. Yeah. I'm sure lots of people are going to be asking questions about this, but it's a very difficult message, and I totally appreciate that, and it's well delivered. And thank you very much, Sarah, as well. So, questions around the table. I'll give people chance as well. So if it goes out too long on one particular thing, I'll move on. So, Chris and then David.
Thank you very much for that. I'm a big fan of Beam. I use the Beam a lot. I think what you've done with the programming is outstanding. It really, you bring in some really good shows, and for the kind of the top-notch ones, like I was at Rich Hall last week, he was fantastic with Sellout. But it's a community resource. So you will have lots of other shows that do not meet that potential. And really that's what community resources are about, aren't they? They're about the fact that they are for everybody, and not everything is going to be as commercial as the big names, the big things. As you say, Blood Brothers did really well. The problem I've got is I look at your figures and I can't hear anything in what you've told me that changes the dynamics, the external factors that impact your ability to raise revenue, because ticketing prices may just put people off because overall income for household hasn't really changed that much. So if we make it more expensive, we might just deter people from coming. There's nothing in what you've said that says, well, how do we encourage people to spend more money in the restaurant? Why would they spend more than they're doing now? The overall spend is just because things have got more expensive. That's in there, but they've also more expensive for us to buy in the first place. And I'm not clear how this turns around, given that I remember reading the report in 2024 and thinking it was wildly optimistic. In a background where all arts institutions are suffering, really, aren't they? It's a very, very challenging environment for the arts at the moment. So, I mean, how are we gonna? I mean, I like the fact that they're there and it's optimistic, and really the beam is fantastic. It needs to be praised to the hill. It's a really fantastic resource. But how do we make it work? How do we achieve those in the real world? What are we actually physically going to do to ensure that these figures that you've put in there actually are achievable in the time frame that you kind of quoted?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your question. There is a lot of focus around Beam's programme, and over the last year, it's an area where we've seen significant progress in terms of securing higher profile, larger work. Things like Blood Brothers, but also things like Punch, which is with us in March, multi-Olivier award winning. But that is only a small part of the overall picture. So as part of kind of the commercialization of Beam, we have built in new workflows, and we've undergone some mild restructuring within Beam to provide additional focus to non-theatrical events. So things like conferencing, meetings, events that are that represent less commercial risk, I suppose, than parts of the program, and that can provide a more kind of sustainable and consistent level of commercial income that then helps us to kind of underpin the program and helps us to carry some of the risk of ongoing creative kind of programming. That is built into this plan. It is something that the work to do that started during the tail end of last financial year. That work is continuing, but it is also starting to show signs of success. We have already hosted a number of conferences, with a number of large conferences due for later this year. What's also important to note is when we are talking about conferencing, meetings and events, one of the benefits of having a food offer at Beam is that we can cater them. And for us, that's a major area of potential profit for the F&B operation, because we have the ability to host, 500 people for a conference in stage 1, which means we can serve 500 lunches in one day. The delegate rate for conferences tends to be higher than we can charge for somebody popping out for lunch in town. So in terms of how we are going to deliver income growth, that's one example of the way in which we're diversifying our operation in order that we can underpin the ongoing cultural development of Beam, as well as the ongoing commercialization of the venue. We're not simply relying on shows, and we're not relying on films. We are looking further afield to find the ways in which we can really maximize income from such an amazing asset. That work continues, it's baked into this plan, and is already showing signs of real growth.
Can I just ask, do you actually have real life bookings in with, actual people coming to use it with numbers that you can kind of?
I'd be very happy to share those separately, absolutely.
That would be great. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, my whole family's in the arts, so I completely understand where you're coming from, how difficult it is. But
you're also absolutely right that the landscape for arts and culture, particularly for live arts, is extremely challenging at the moment. It's actually more challenging than many arts leaders realised until the report from UK Theatre, Salt UK Theatre came out earlier this year, as well as the report on the state of touring from the Arts Council came out earlier this year. That lays it out in stark terms. When those reports came out, we revisited this plan and we rewrote it to make sure that the data in those reports is accurately reflected in our forecasts. In addition to that, built into the longer term plan are ways in which to reduce the risk of further deterioration of the touring theatre sector. As many of you will know, we present work at Beam, we don't necessarily create our own. As the touring theatre sector continues to deteriorate, as I said before, about 75% of touring theatre respondents describe the state of touring as poor or very poor. As that continues to be a challenge, we are looking at ways to rely less and less on touring shows, and built into this ongoing plan are levers for us to pull to start to create work that is local to Hertford, by and for Hertford residents, that will fill parts of the programme where we might otherwise struggle to find high quality touring work.
thank you very much.
David.
Just wanted to open by saying thank you for the advanced briefing I had as group leader on this. It was, I think, timely and very helpful. In opening, Sarah said that the previous business plan was overly optimistic. How can we be sure that we won't be sitting here in 12 or 24 months' time saying exactly the same thing about the next iteration of the plan? And more specifically, are you going to look to any external scrutiny of the new business plan to test it?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. It's such an important question. So this business plan has been scrutinised by a number of different people, including our accounts colleagues, including colleagues at Beam Board, but also we've sought informal advice from external experts as well. So this plan has been before relationship managers from Arts Council England, and it has been before commercial producers from the sector as well, all of whom have made some recommendations that we've taken on board, but the overall response to that informal sharing has been, we believe this plan is viable.
Thank you. At the end of your presentation, you gave us some figures for ticket sales, food and beverages, etc., for Q1 of this financial year, but you didn't say anything about the financial performance. Is there anything you can say about that?
Yeah, but would you clarify what you mean by financial performance?
Whether we're making significant losses as we did last year?
For Q1?
Yeah.
So at the moment, that's not something I'm able to share because we haven't, I mean, Q1 hasn't finished yet. So these are currently forecasts based on
You're
the...
able to give food and beverage ticket sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So locally to Beam, we measure a number of different data sets, and that's part of the departmental key performance indicators, which we use to measure the performance of every department at Beam and allow us to stay on track in terms of this plan that we've written that will stabilise the finances. So the data that I shared from there comes from the key performance indicator data that we collect locally at Beam. What it doesn't represent is the overall kind of accounts figures, which are being worked on. It's my understanding that we have a clear set of accounts for April and May, but we haven't yet come to the end of June. So it's difficult to provide clear data to members there. And what I wouldn't want to do is kind of, provide data that prove to be incomplete or inaccurate. However, that data will be made available as soon as it is ready, I believe, Brian, is that right?
So how often are you...
Can I just have a comment?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Sorry. So within that presentation that Steve's done today is some figures around 26, 27, which was, I think, on top of my head, 283,000 overspend for this year, which would equate to around a £480,000 pressure in year. That is based on our assumptions we built into that business case around occupancy and around ticket prices and so forth. What we're doing now is obviously looking at the first quarter when it's coming out in the next week or so to see is our occupancy rates in line with that, is our ticket prices in line with that, and also looking at seeing whether the income that we've earned in the first 3 months aligns with that as well. So a lot of work is going on in the background. But to give you an early indication based on where we think it could be is within that business plan already.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood that answer. How are we doing financially? How are we doing? We had a problem of reporting last year, didn't we? Whereby in Q3 the reporting was saying that we were going to lose what? Can't remember the figure now. 475,000. And then 3 months later, it was nearly £1 million. So are we going to be having something similar happening, or are we going to be in a much better position? No, we do better in terms of ticket sales, etc. But that's no comfort if we're still losing vast amounts of money.
So as I said, based on that business plan that's been presented to members today, it's indicating in the region of 480,000 will be the potential pressure on the council in this year, which is again based on that assumptions that we built in. That now needs to be analysed against a Q1 performance when we get it in the next few weeks. But if we are achieving the business plan based on where we are thinking it's going to be achieving for this year, then we'll be looking at around a £480,000 pressure.
Sorry, yes, Bob.
Yes, thank you very much. For me, there obviously are a number of issues here, aren't there? But for me, if not the main one, but maybe the one that hits hardest is apropos the point that David has just made, which is, where did this come from? Someone in this room has already used the word shock. I mean, this is literally a shocking state of affairs. How on earth can we go from the sort of deficit that David's just mentioned in the order of 400 to something approaching 1 million? I've got a number of points that I'll make during the course of this meeting, but at the minute, I'm not understanding how this shock can have occurred. Do we in the way we manage? Do we undertake? Oh, I'm sorry. In the way we manage the theatre, do we undertake monthly cash management accounts? Do we track the accounts? Do we track the performance every day? I mean, as it happens, I've been involved myself personally in 2 startups, and I can absolutely assure you, when you start up a business, you track it every single minute, let alone every day, let alone every quarter. Where has the tracking been here? How have we reached this state of affairs where this news is a shock? And if I might just say, to put a little bit of flesh on those bones, as I understand, reading the paper, as I understand it, the projected budgeted income for the period in question was £4.8 million. The actual income is £2.8 million. Now, obviously that is a £2 million gap in the income predicted. And as a percentage of the prediction, it's enormous. To slightly sweeten the pill, the expenditure forecast in the budget was 4.6 million. Actually, that came in at 3.8. So it's still an awful lot of money, but the clear issue is income. How does a gap of 2 million all of a sudden spring itself upon us? It is literally shocking.
Brian, do you want to deal with that?
I'll start. So obviously the movement between Q3 and Q4 was around £700,000. And obviously roughly half of that related to income being less than what we had projected at the year end. And obviously the other half is in relation to expenditure. Within the income side, a big proportion of that has been around the where income has been received in year, but obviously the shows don't happen until the following year. So therefore that income has to be accounted for in future years' accounts. Now, obviously, come the year end, we noticed there was some income that was still included within 25-26 that should have been in 26-27, and that equated to around £200,000 of that income. Now, obviously, what's happened for this year now is that we are reconciling, and we have been reconciling, but we're now making sure that when income is coming in each day, and obviously each month, we will move the income into the correct year straight away rather than leaving it till later in the year. So that has been resolved. In relation to some of the expenditure, obviously there was some late payments being received in relation to some of the producers' theatre costs that obviously we didn't actually accounted for during the Q3 process, but obviously it came alight when we were getting towards the year end and obviously having to accrue for all invoices. So again, that is one proportion of why the expenditure has exceeded where we were forecasting.
I hope I haven't misread the papers, but my understanding is that expenditure has come in less than forecast. The problem lies with income, where you're £2 million adrift. And to repeat the point that David very eloquently made, until not long ago, we had no idea at all this was coming. Something has gone wrong.
The budgets that you are alluding to is in relation to the original budgets that was set at the beginning of the year, whereas obviously when we forecast an outturn position at Q3, we would obviously suggested that the figures would be lower in what was obviously the original budgets. So when you're talking about that £2 million income, that £2 million wouldn't have been 2 million reported at Q3. It would have been an extra 300k difference rather than 2 million difference. So again, we just need to be mindful that the 4.8 is the original budget that was set as part of the original business plan and original budget that members approved back in March 25. But obviously during the year, we will then start forecasting where we think that income will be. And obviously the variance between Q3 and Q4 on income was around 350,000.
Chair, may I contribute to answering the question? I just want to talk in broad terms, Councillor Jerry, if I may, and touch on some of the work that's happened over the past year. Yes, I use the word shock because the shock came to us as it did to members. And partly that speaks to the complexity of the finances at Beam and the work that needed to be undertaken to ensure that reporting could be accurate, complete and timely. I think it's fair to say, but Brian, please do correct me if I'm wrong, that the council in general underestimated the complexity of how Beam's finances needed to work. As you know, as a startup, as a new organisation, we measure things on a daily basis, and locally to Beam, we absolutely do everywhere that we can. Yeah, like obsessively, which is why we're able to share kind of data from those key performance indicators, because we have that data at our fingertips. Where we have found challenge is in the dovetailing between the accounting requirements for Beam, as you put it, similar to a startup, and the accounting requirements for a local authority, which are very, very different. Getting those two areas to meet has required an enormous amount of work from Brian's team. Now, we are at a stage now where a new model has been developed that allows us much more accurate and much more timely data that comes from the council accounting processes and gets to marry with our local kind of data collection at Beam. So a lot of work has happened in response to those reporting challenges that we've had over the year. That's not as an excuse to say that, you know, the shock was not avoidable, but hopefully members can feel some reassurance that in the future, because of the new model that has been created by Brian's team, we won't be in the same position again.
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, thanks for coming along tonight. It's a pleasure to meet you, albeit in these formal circumstances. You've clearly got a very challenging job. That's what I would say. But I too support Beam. I think it's a fantastic facility that was well delivered by the council. I just want to establish a few things because I'm hearing a disconnect really between how a private business operates and how a council operates. So there's no blame being apportioned here. I'm just trying to understand this conflict a bit better. And it goes to David's comment as well and Bob's. So the issue for me is that you weren't getting a monthly P&L back in 25-26. You might have felt it in your bones that something was wrong, clearly, but you didn't really know the actual cash position at that time. And is that correct?
So it's correct to say that yeah, we found it challenging to get real clarity from those monthly accounts. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that definitely would have put you personally on the back foot. So I don't envy you that whatsoever. Brian, I'm a bit concerned about deferring the ticket sale money into the next year. It seems to have really tied Steve's hands behind his back in terms of the final position. I just wondered, is that legally required, or is it something that can be looked into for future reference?
No, there is a requirement and the accounting code whereby we need to account for income and expenditure where an activity happened in that year. So if we incur expenditure, but the service is doesn't happen until the following year, or receive income, that the income relates to a service that happens in the following year, we need to move that income and expenditure forward. Likewise, if we incurred an activity in this year, but we didn't pay for it, we need to accrue for it in the old year, so that it's showing the correct charge for that activity in that year.
Can I put some flesh on the bones of that, Brian? I give you an example. So, for instance, a show that happens in September might go on sale the previous September. So the previous September, we're receiving money in ticket sales. that money has to be transferred into the following year when the show happens. But actually, we can't really account for it until the show is complete, at which point we also need to account for the cost of that show and the producer's share, but the producer might not invoice for another 6 months. So we're, by that time, we're potentially even into another financial year. So, and that's just one show out of hundreds. So it's a complicated picture in terms of the various different timelines for those various different shows and events.
Can I just pick up again on something Councillor Deering mentioned, which is the income? So we hear ticket sales and the year-on-year increase, which is wonderful to see, by the way. But the cost of putting on those events, that's not what we're not seeing that, and that's my concern. I think other members' concerns that actually it might look very good on the top line, but the bottom line might look horrendous. So I suppose in a way, my question is probably for Brian. Are you satisfied that you're going to now produce the right financial reports for Steve to act on and be able to give him some flexibility within the business plan that he's following?
We always provide the information that goes through the general ledger system. So the information that Steve will get will be based on the actual income or cost that has gone through. Where obviously it's fallen down more so is around the accruement of income and expenditure that we might not have forecast correctly. So the income we get in, we know is correct and is reconciled, and the expenditure we know is correct. It's more about the forecasting that is the potential issue for us. We are obviously strengthening that, and we've strengthened that this year. We've got, obviously, like I said, we've got a reconciliation of the income side of things. We also built into that a function to be able to pick up all the direct costs associated with that show as well, built into that. So we then know, okay, this is the income, this is what we've got to pay over to the producers. So we then know we need to accrue for that expenditure until that thing actually comes in, and we can then obviously reconcile that off. So we're in a stronger position this year than we were last year with the models and spreadsheets that we've got set up now to support that process.
So one final question. I'm sorry to ask you this, but what is your confidence level about the forecast that's in the paperwork in terms of, I think, in the third financial year, breaking even?
My confidence level is high with one specific caveat. And that specific caveat is it's a challenging landscape for arts and culture. There will be crosswinds over the next few years. Now, where we can, we have built in headroom into that plan that will allow us the flexibility to weather those crosswinds. But it's difficult to predict what they might be and the impact they might have. I think if I didn't have a high level of confidence in that plan, I wouldn't be presenting it to you today. And I look forward to revisiting that plan at future committee meetings and reporting on it. It is critical that we pull out all of the stops to get Beam to be as successful and as sustainable as it can be in as short a time frame as possible. This plan recognises the challenges ahead and seeks to mitigate those risks in every way possible.
One for you, actually, Chair, if I may. Just picking up on what Steve said there. What would be the appropriate timeline to bring an update from Beam back to audit and governance? Because I noticed on the schedule that it's not actually included even November or January. So I just wondered what your feeling was on that and whether you...
Would you mind if I just squeeze a comment in there, because it will relate to the answer, I think. I also spotted in the papers the suggestion that this should come back to this committee in a year's time. I think that's far too slow. I think that this needs to come back to this committee at least for every meeting. I mean, this is a serious situation. I don't think we can just let it run for another year. So I'm just like reinforcing Tom's point there. And just to add to it, I would like to know what going forward will be the frequency of financial reporting coming in to the various people in this council who need to be on top of this. you know, it's standard to have monthly management accounts. I'm not at the moment clear whether monthly management accounts have been produced. I'm hearing that there's as Tom put it, and I think you've acknowledged, there is a structural disconnect between the way you might operate as a commercial business and the way a council operates. So I'm going just beyond the interjected question. One of the things I'd like to know is whether any consideration is being given to the corporate structure of the theatre. My understanding is it's a wholly owned facility of East Herts. In effect, it's part of East Herts. Is that correct? Should we be changing it so, I don't know, it becomes a freestanding company, albeit with East Herts as shareholders or something along those lines? Is any thought being given to that? Because we cannot have this situation again.
Okay, Bob. Brian?
If you don't mind, I'll start. Maybe Ben might want to come in relation to that last point. So the proposal was that it would be a separate section within the quarterly monitoring reports that would come to this committee, which is roughly every time a meeting occurs. But obviously, if member wants a separate report rather than being part of the quarterly monitoring report, then obviously we can look at that as well. What we're doing within internally is that obviously we are having monthly meetings to look at the performance indicators that we've now set ourselves. So we've got some clear indicators to know that if we are moving off plan, and obviously we all know a lot earlier in the process we are not on target, and therefore we can then report up. We're also proposing to have monthly catch-ups with the portfolio holders, Councillor Hopewell and Councillor Britton, to go through those, and then obviously there'll be the regular updates going to leadership team and also to the Beam board as well. And obviously there's an opportunity for, you know, to be incorporated within the quarterly monitoring reports, or, you know, if members to this committee decide they want separate reports on this, then obviously we can then look at that as well. So that was my proposal in relation to that.
Okay, we'll come back to this in a second. I just want to take David and then Chris.
I mean, it's very difficult because I mean, I understand people are kind of really concerned about the figures, but I have to say I'm not actually that surprised by them, because they're worse than expected, but not surprising, because the arts and culture are operating in a very constrained environment where external factors that none of us have control over are impacting people's willingness to engage with art and culture and to spend their money on art and culture events. I'm not clear what the risk management strategy is for this. Should those figures be unrealizable, given that you have no control over whether they are or not? Because you can't control these external factors. There has to be some kind of mitigation plan that says, if this doesn't work, what are we doing? Otherwise, you know, we're going to be looking at another enormous deficit, completely uncontrollable deficit, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredibly important question. In broad strokes, it comes back to the comments around kind of inbuilt headroom within the business plan, but also in terms of the specific key performance indicators. We saw significant growth from 24-25 to 25-26 in things like stage occupancy percentage. From last year to this year, we are only forecasting a 1% increase in that. And from this year to next year, a 2% increase, and then it flatlines. So what we are not looking to do within this plan is kind of really over forecast. We know where those areas of risks are. They are predominantly around the cultural programme. They are around the performance of the commercial stage programme, and they are around the performance of the commercial cinema programme. With cinema particularly, we are at the whims of larger distributors and how many films they want to put to cinema versus how many they want to put straight to Netflix. There are inbuilt measures within the plan that don't kind of over-egg the pudding, if that makes sense. So we are not looking in those key risky areas for significant growth. And in exactly the same way in terms of ticket pricing, what we are not anticipating within this plan is significant increases in ticket pricing. And actually our ticket pricing kind of across the piece will remain slightly lower than sector benchmarks throughout the length of this plan.
may have missed something, so I will apologise in advance if I have. But given that one of the issues is that we need to get more people into the theatre, we need to improve, particularly the engagement in the cinema, which quite often runs significantly under capacity, and how is not increasing the footfall through the theatre going to improve the overall business plan? I'm not clear about that. I mean, if we're relying entirely on commercial ventures like conferencing, you know, and to come in and make up the difference, how does it continue to be an arts and cultural event?
Sorry, just to be clear, what we're not doing is we're not forecasting occupancy percentages that are in advance of sector benchmarks. And I think that's an important thing to do. What we're not saying is during the course of this plan, we're going to become significantly better than every other venue. What we are saying during the course of this plan is we're going to perform well at the level of established venues, and we're going to create additional revenue through aggregation of incremental gains right across the organisation. We talked a little earlier about venue share. Now, I'm not able to put a figure on that because it's slightly commercially sensitive, but what we have seen over the last year is growth across venue share that relates specifically to our commercial contracting of shows. So that's an area whereby we can continue to welcome commercial shows. We are not putting too much pressure on growth specifically for occupancy percentage, and we are achieving a greater return from those shows through the commercial contracting of them.
I mean, I can really hear you're pulling out all the stops here. I mean, I really do appreciate the amount of hard work you're putting into this. I really do think that in the reporting of it, the how it's going to achieve needs to be a lot more transparent. There are a lot of figures up there and know how this is going to somehow magically it's going to happen. But I think I understand you have got a business plan, you've got thought in it, but we definitely need to have a much better understanding of how it's going to be achieved.
I completely hear that. I think one of the challenges with presenting the plan in a public forum is that almost all of the modelling that sits behind the business plan is commercially sensitive and has the ability to impact on commercial negotiations for upcoming programmes. That said, outside of a public forum, there's a lot more data we can share.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, firstly, just want to echo and emphasise a couple of points that have already been made. Given how serious the situation is, if it was me that was having to report to this committee or council, I'd be wanting daily updates on the situation as well. And I fully support the calls to have this issue before Audit and Governance at each meeting. I chair ONS, and there's been a lot of discussion amongst ONS members about BEAM as well. And one of the things that I'll be discussing with Martin later is the possibility of having another joint meeting, ONS looking at some aspects of BEAM, Audit and Governance looking at others. We might not end up doing that, but that's something that's being considered, and I thought I'd be open with members about that. A couple of further questions about the detail. First thing, we've been talking about the new revised business plan. When will members see that revised business plan?
Go on, man.
I mean, the headlines are in the paper itself. I think, as Steve said, there's a lot of detail behind it, which is quite commercially sensitive. So we're happy to offer a Thursday night briefing so we can get across that level of detail in that kind of confidential space. The plan itself would need to be signed off for the budget setting process, which will align with the NTFP, so later on in the year. So you're having first sight of it now. We can offer more information through that Thursday night, but it will actually be signed off officially through the budget.
How does that answer translate to a date?
Chair, can I just say I didn't regard that answer as acceptable at all.
Certainly. Does anyone have a solution to this date-wise, or when a date can be given?
Oh, we don't have to meet in public, by the way, just to state the obvious.
Yeah, well, apologies, not the right, wasn't an acceptable answer, Councillor Deering. We can do the Thursday night briefing. We can set that up relatively soon to share all that level of detail. I think in terms of the actual So I'm getting confused with the actual decision of signing off the business plan and how it's baked into the budget. That would be part of the budget setting process through council, which would be later in the year. But as I say, we can organise that Thursday night briefing much sooner.
I'm guessing just to add a bit to that. So I'm proposing to bring the medium-term financial plan update to executive in October. So obviously, there's an opportunity there that we could feed it into that period potentially, whether it comes to audit and governance first or whether it goes to executive. We'll just need to have that internal discussion because obviously the MTFFP goes to executive first in the October. Then it would then come to A&G afterwards. To obviously scrutinise is the normal process. So whether we do the same or whether we do it other way around, we'll need to come back to you.
David?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit confused though, because I thought the revised business plan was for immediate implementation. It's for 26, 27. So, and it's been talked about as a complete artifact. You know, there's no further work to be done on it. It's been externally reviewed. We are implementing it. So why can't councillors see it?
So the next audit and governance meeting is the 30th of September. So, you know, we could bring it there.
I mean, we obviously discussed that at the programme agenda item. Bob?
I'm really sorry if I just didn't catch something, but I'm hearing references to October.
So October is when the updated medium-term financial plan will come to members, which is the starting position for when we start looking at the budget for 27-28.
Well,
but sorry, that is
sorry.
executive, not audit and governance. That's when the MTFFP will be going.
Well, I'm looking across the chamber because I think there's a great commonality of view on both sides of the chamber. I mean, October would be roughly 6 months into the financial year. This is a very serious situation. I mean, you know, I think the word crisis, it would not be amiss. There needs to be some urgency. And again, I'd echo David's comments that everything I've read gives me the impression that the new business plan is in existence somewhere. Sorry.
Ben?
Yeah, no, I hear everything councillors are saying. In terms of that business plan, yes, there is content behind it. I suggest that we set up one of the Thursday night briefings as soon as possible so we can convey that information. I think there's then the actual formal process of building into the budget, which comes later on. I accept what you're saying, Councillor Deering, probably less relevant in terms of us implementing, but we can set that Thursday night briefing up relatively soon, the next week or two.
I'll come back to you on that. I'm not sure it's good enough, frankly. It's not a criticism. It's just it's important information in that business plan that some of which we've been told, some of which we haven't. We need to be able to read it and decide whether it's good enough, frankly. And will a Thursday night briefing provide that information? I don't know. I suppose we'll have to let the process run itself and then come back to full council if necessary.
Sorry, Chris, is it relation to this?
Ask, is it feasible to have a Thursday night briefing in 2 weeks' time? Is that realistic for you all to achieve? In which case, can we put it forward as being something we can book in? We can all have it in our diaries.
Perhaps 3 weeks. Steve's going to be going on paternity leave in the next couple of days. I think that might be your first task when you get back, Steve. Does that sound okay? So we can set a date for 3 weeks' time. But from officers, that's fine.
Yeah, and that sound acceptable, 3 weeks' time?
It's very nice of you to look at me with that question. Speaking personally, I would like it to be within this month, so within July. But you can tell. I mean, you know, this is a very serious situation, and you know, based on my own experience, we should be all over this like a rash. You know, tomorrow isn't quick enough, so the sooner we get the briefing, the better. Definitely within this one.
Certainly. Sorry, Tom. Maura.
Thank you, Chair. Just a slight change of tack here. I'm just thinking about your costs, being a bit of a number cruncher myself, as you probably realise. Your fixed costs, they're quite high Now, I don't know the full parameters of which a venue operates to, so please shout me down if I've got this wrong, but is there any room to trim them? Because I think it is a bit of a millstone around your neck and being so high.
Yeah, absolutely, and that work is ongoing. So there are, a number of contracts, for instance, that were in place prior to my arrival that have since been retendered and secured at lower rates. One of the biggest areas of cost for us is around staffing. Our staffing costs are quite high, and that is normal for a venue. It is also true to say that the overall staffing costs, with us being part of local government, are perhaps slightly higher than they would be otherwise in the commercial sector. That's a nice problem to have for our staff. But yeah, certainly, provides us with the requirement to think a little differently about how we operate, how we staff, and how we run Beam.
Certainly, Maura.
Thank you, Chair. In the paper, there's a mention of a dedicated finance business partner. Can we have an assurance that that is more than what you've said, Brian, about your monthly checking, and also that this person really has a handle on the complexities of financing Beam, because it feels like we've learned that on the hoof, and we really need to sort that out really quite quickly.
Yep. So we have appointed someone into that role now, so they'll be starting imminently. It's an internal resource who can then focus their attention on the Beam. As I said, we have done a lot of work between March, April time to now in relation to all the actual other work behind the scenes around making sure all the reconciliations, all the models are being built so that we can then start forecasting with some more certainty around our assumptions behind that, so that there is more certainty provided to members, along with obviously the key indicators that we're now measuring against, so that we can ascertain whether there are any potential dips that we need to be aware of quickly, so that we can then address those in a timely manner.
Thank you. And then also, just to go back to the diversification, Steve, if you don't mind, and I hear that you're pulling out all of the stocks, but there's just a couple of things on a practical thing. I saw in their Deliveroo, and it really made me shudder. But there's not many staff. They already multitask all evening whenever I've been there. Please don't make them do Deliveroo. I'd rather they were ready to serve my drink in the interval than be worrying about deliveries.
You'll be delighted to know that it's not possible for us to register with Deliveroo because we don't have a company number.
Or any other food delivery, please.
So far, we haven't found one that we would be able to register with. The note in the report is around exploring that as a potential, which we are doing, but that's not a kind of definite commitment to commencing that. But what it is an indication of everything that we're doing to work to maximise profit wherever we possibly can.
Okay, I've got my reservations there. A couple of other thoughts. I was really upset some years ago when some of our local schools had to go elsewhere because they were outpriced for their major concerts. That's still a huge customer base. Why Beam does not want 500 parents on a Monday night in the bar, I do not understand. That's still a market to look at, surely, to bring those schools back from where they've gone to. And then the second one goes back to qualities and ticket buying. In Hertford, we're lucky we've got the tourist office is dead opposite. So people go in there and the tourist office staff go online and buy tickets for people. That presumably doesn't happen in the other towns in East Herts. It's still an issue, and I'm sure it's losing ticket sales.
Thank you. So just to come to the schools point, so we've seen rapid growth in kind of schools audiences across the last year. It's an area of specific focus for us. And in fact, we have somebody who is a part-time member of staff who is dedicated to being that school's liaison in order to grow groups. As I say, it's something where we've had real success over the last year.
I mean these annual school concerts where you literally fill the whole theatre.
Well, we have a number of those throughout the year from a number of different schools. Yeah, it's absolutely something that we support, something that we host. And sorry, forgive me, the second question was around ticket buying. I'm conscious I want to provide a proper answer. Would you mind kind of clarifying the question with regards to equalities?
That we don't have a box office and people have to buy tickets online.
Anybody who comes to Beam is able to buy a ticket with any member of the Beam staff. So all of our front of house team are fully trained in how our box office system works. So although there isn't a box office counter, every member of our welcome team acts as a box office assistant as well. And in fact, lots of other departments as well. Our technical manager sells a surprising amount of tickets. So yeah, anybody who comes into the venue in person can buy a ticket in person.
1 second, George. Chris.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to come back to, we kind of got a bit distracted with the idea of having this meeting in order to have a proper look at this business plan and look at its risks, the mitigations, what, you know, how realistic is it? You know, because we don't have it to look at tonight. I know that Bob was concerned we weren't doing it sooner, but I understand you're going on paternity leave, and good luck with that and congratulations. But could we actually put in our diaries that we will be meeting on a Thursday in 3 weeks' time to fully evaluate this business plan? Could we just get that all agreed and diarised?
So who can make that commitment?
Just before we get diaries up, my hesitation about doing as a Thursday night meeting rather than as a council meeting is that I don't understand the reason for doing it in private. Some parts of it need to be done in private where it relates to contract, yes, but surely the rest of the discussion like this should be held in public. It should be accessible to the public. There are lots of people out there really interested in the future of Beam. They've got a right to hear that discussion and indeed participate if necessary. So I hesitate to agree to it being taken offline in that way. If the majority thinks that's the best way forward, then so be it. But those are my reservations.
I think just looking through the calculators now, it's well over half that would be commercially sensitive.
So just a question, I suppose, either Brian or Peter, is there something that the audit and governance could do to reschedule a meeting? So it's a public meeting that we could then go into section part 2?
Yeah, I mean, there's no issues about having part 1 and part 2. It's more about availability of diaries and stuff and rooms. So yeah, not sure.
I mean, through you, Chair, I mean, if it's a case of a joint meeting between this committee and ONS or whatever you want to do, in theory, yes, that could be done, but probably won't be able to give you an answer now, but it's possible. That's what you had in mind.
Yeah. Bob?
Thank you very much, Martin. Well, I'm in agreement with the sentiments moving opposite me. I think the reason you're suggesting we get a date in the diary, so we've got a date in the diary. Absolutely, we should get a date in the diary. And what was it? Thursday, 3 weeks? We should get it in the diary and make sure it happens. And sorry,
Yeah,
Chris. And I'd also like to align myself with David's comments about the importance of this meeting being in public. A word that's not been used so far is taxpayer. What we're doing here is we're managing the taxpayers' money. And at the moment, the taxpayer is facing down a deficit on this financial year of nearly £1 million. So we owe it to the taxpayers to be the best custodians we can of their money. I'm completely in agreement with David that this meeting should be a public meeting. If there needs to be a part 2, and I think we all understand why there probably does need to be a part 2, so be it. But the meeting should be a public meeting.
I also understand the difficulty
in
of
July.
a large number of people together. If we want to do ONS and the audit committee, it's paramount that the audit committee have sight of that.
Certainly. So my view would be that you need to go and schedule a meeting and find out. David, do you want a joint meeting with? Certainly. Yeah. Certainly. Okay. Yep, I am most certainly. As long as you're okay with that. Okay. George, you want to
I like to throw out a mad idea every now and then. I guess question, right? I take it much of the business is repeat business. It's like the same people go several times, and once you build that in, you know, is that?
It varies. So different genres, different types of events have different kind of reattendance rates. What we are seeing is that generally about a third of our audience are new to us. So about kind of 70% or just over are repeat visitors. Yeah.
So 17%.
70, sorry,
70.
70 are repeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
What my idea predicates on this: if you're not always filling things out and you need to build repeat business, then within East Hearts there are tons of community groups and volunteers, and to two birds with one stone, you can one, give thanks to them potentially when you know that something isn't going to be as booked out, but maybe allotting some free tickets and then maybe building in, you know, because it may be that people don't go to BIM, people don't think about it. And in any case, even if you give them free tickets, they're still likely to buy drinks and whatever. But I'm just thinking of ways in which maybe you could drive some more people.
Yeah, so we've got a number of different schemes similar to that are already in place. Part of the challenge with the commercial program is that it's not our money; it's the money of the producers. So anything in relation to complimentary tickets or discounts has to be signed off by producers, and we have very little influence over that, unfortunately.
Okay,
But yeah,
so
there are similar schemes in place across the program.
That's my idea.
Okay. I'm conscious of the time, obviously, and we've agreed to explore another meeting at some point and the format of that meeting. So that's something we need to do. So unless there's any more questions or whatever on this, I'd like to move on. No. So
I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sure you meant to say this. But again, looking across the room, I think we would like confirmation now that there will be a meeting within June, and preferably
July.
Okay, yeah. So I'm getting overexcited, and preferably at the 3-week mark that Chris has made reference to. But I don't think we should go away from this meeting without confirmation that there will be a meeting in July. Because otherwise, I'm concerned it will just get away from.
Yeah. So, okay. So the recommendation, I will insert a new recommendation then. B. Yeah. So the recommendation is to review BEAM's position and make recommendations to the executive member for wellbeing in regards to BEAM's performance and business plan targets. And B, the recommendation B is to hold a further meeting in July for discussion of the new business plan. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Can someone make that proposal? So David propose. I assume you second. Could I have a show of hands? Those in favour of those recommendations, and those against, and any abstentions? George, do you
I
vote?
did put my hand up.
Sorry, I missed that one.
I'm in favour.
So that's carried. That's unanimous. Thank you. So exactly. So yeah, Steve, you're free to leave or stay, whatever you want to do. No, certainly. Certainly, and thank you for weathering the questions. Right, agenda item 11. Provisional outturn 25-26 and draft statement of accounts. Is this you, Carl? Alison? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the 25-26 provisional outturn position. This position remains provisional until the Council's accounts have been audited. An overspend of £678,000 is reported against the net revenue budget. This is a £172,000 adverse movement from that reported as at Q3. Appendix A provides a breakdown of the revenue budget and shows the movements from Q3. This overspend will be funded from earmarked reserves. There have been a number of movements since Q3 budget monitoring was reported to Audit and Governance. Details of these are contained in paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3 in the report and within Appendix B. In closing the 25-26 accounts, just over £2 million of earmarked reserves have been utilised. These reserves have been to fund several areas of expenditure, such as the mobilisation of the new waste contract, redundancies and costs associated with LGR. Reserves has also been used to smooth the impact on the revenue position in respect of housing benefit subsidy, loss on the property funds and business rates collection fund deficit. The balance on reserves as at 31st March 2026 is £19.3 million. This includes 3.9 in the general fund and 15.3 in earmarked reserves. These are in line with the projections in the most recent medium-term financial plan that was approved by Council in March 2026. The level of reserves held are deemed adequate to support the Council's financial position and medium-term strategy. Capital spend of £8.6 million was incurred in 25-26. This mainly related to the purchase of new waste and recycling vehicles and equipment in line with the new contract. An underspend of £3.3 million is reported against the 25-26 capital programme. Of this, £1.1 million is requested to be carried forward into 26-27. Details of the capital schemes where budgets are not required to be rolled forwards are contained in paragraph 4.4. The 25-26 draft accounts were published on the Council's website last Thursday, 25th June, slightly ahead of today's statutory deadline. The external audit will begin in September 2026 and will need to be completed by 31st January 2027. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alison. Questions, comments around the table? Bob?
Sorry, Martin, it's me again. I've got a couple of questions. Thank you for the report. Thank you. The first is, can someone just talk the committee, certainly me, through the situation with Rapier House, which seems to be a drain on the finances of the council? I'm not clear what's going on at Rapier House. My second question is capital receipts. There's a line in the paper that refers to capital receipts. I don't have it in front of me now, but of the order of 4 million, something like that. I couldn't see what those capital receipts actually are. I'd like to know what they are, please.
So Rapier House is currently being used to house the grounds maintenance contractor following them departing from Buntingford service station from the depot there. Whilst planning permission is being sought for Amwell End. That is in progress, nearing completion. So we're currently incurring costs relating to that building, so we're unable to lease it out. Once the grounds maintenance contractor vacates the building, the Rapier House will be, we've got a potential tenant for that building, so that will be let in the coming months is the anticipation. That for capital receipts, as you mentioned, there's a table in the report that shows how the capital programme was funded. I think it's around 4.9 million of capital receipts were used. The majority of those are the receipts from sale of the flats at Limekiln in Bishop Stortford, so circa £3 million, 3.6 million of those, and there's other smaller amounts that add up to that total, but I can provide a breakdown of the capital receipts if required that were utilised in the year.
Thank you very much for the answer. If you could just drop me a note with those receipts, I'd be grateful. You didn't mention Millstream there. Millstream's been disposed of, I think, hasn't it? What have we achieved by way of a capital receipt there?
So agreement was given by council last financial year to sell the properties within Millstream. One was sold last financial year. In May this year, there was agreement to sell the whole company. In progress at the moment, so we haven't realised that as yet, but that will be in this year.
Although obviously 2 more of those properties are being sold outside of the actual main Millstream. One's now been sold, I believe, in May, and the other one's still going for legal contracts before that gets sold as well.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks very much for the report. It's very good. I've not heard of this, but the Lothbury Property Fund. I don't know what that is. Just wondered if you could tell me what that is. Thanks.
Can't remember the exact year, but some years ago the council invested 2 lots of 10 million in 2 different property funds. In the last 2 years, we've been coming out of those, disinvesting in those, and those have been winding up. So for the Lothbury one, there was a loss on the £10 million invested initially. However, we have received returns on that over the years that we've been invested in it. So that loss that's mentioned in there is just the finalisation of us coming out of that property fund.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions, Chris and David?
This is going to be a little thing, and I apologise in advance because everyone's really tired. But I do notice that we have made a loss on parking. And the reason why I'm bringing this up because actually we've had a lot of complaints and dissatisfaction from businesses in Ware that are unable to park for their businesses, particularly in the high street. So both George and I have received several complaints. And we did actually broach the idea of offering business parking so that that small businesses that on the high street could buy a year-on parking space. They certainly have been used before. The doctor's surgery in Kibes Lane had dedicated spaces, so I couldn't see the reason for not offering the small businesses a dedicated parking space because it's a guaranteed income. They're going to pay for the whole year. It makes their lives easier. It guarantees income for us, and so far those requests have actually hit a brick wall, and I've never really quite understood why, because obviously relying on short-term parking where you might get somebody for 2 hours on a Thursday and not get anybody else again until Saturday didn't seem to make a good business plan, especially as we're running at a loss. And why we weren't looking at accommodating both a better business plan in terms of generating guaranteed income for those parking spaces and making life for small businesses, particularly in Ware and Hertford, a little bit easier. Is that something that can be looked into?
I think Ben will field this one.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to point out, parking, the actual income from parking has gone up consistently year on year. There's some other budgets in the overall parking budget, including business rates and cleaning contract, which kind of are areas of over expenditure. But parking income is generally quite healthy. On the point about the business permits, yes, completely understand that, and have had similar direct contact with those businesses themselves. I think the portfolio holder is planning to bring forward some proposals shortly on business permits across the district. So just another month or two on getting those proposals worked up, but that is coming.
David, that was the question, was it? Excellent, thank you. Any more for any more? Okay, so on that basis, yes, those 3 recommendations. Note the general fund revenue outturn of 678,000 overspend to be funded from the general reserve. Note the capital outturn position and improved carry forward budgets of 1.142 million. And finally, to receive the 25-26 draft statement of accounts prior to them being audited. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Proposer Bob and seconder Tom. Could I please have a show of hands? Those in favour? That is unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. This is you then, Brian. Annual governance statement 25-26.
Thank you, Chair. So item 12 presents the Council's annual governance statement for 25-26. The statement is a key component of the Council's governance framework and explains how we ensure effective governance, sound decision making, risk management and internal control arrangements across the authority, and it links in closely with the statement of accounts that was published last week as well. It also reflects on the challenges faced during the year, including progress on financial reporting and governance improvements, and identifies the key actions that will be taken during 26-27 to further strengthen our arrangements. It obviously also picks up all the recommendations that has come out of the previous auditors' reports, going back from the EY on their statutory recommendations as well as on AZERT's recent last two statement of accounts reports that would have come through to the audit and governance. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. Comments, questions, what have you? Oh, that's going to be a quick one, isn't it?
For your BDIs who might have come along to risk management training, you might have saw some linkage to the annual governance statement in with that training you had the other week. So again, it's just how it all ties into the risk management process. But
there you go. Thank you very much. So there's just a single recommendation that members review and comment on the annual governance statement for 25-26, which you have. Could I please have a proposer and a seconder? This is a very tough audience tonight. Maura, proposer and a seconder. Anyone? Tom, thank you. New members here getting their day. So a show of hands, those in favour, please raise your hands. That is unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Now the strategic risk review is register Q4 25-26. Thank you, Brian.
thank you, Chair. So this report presents the Q4 strategic risk register and provides an update on the Council's most significant strategic risks and the actions being taken to manage them. At our February meeting, members may remember we had a discussion around the existing local government reorganisation risk, and the views from the committee was that it needed to be broadened out to better reflect the potential impact that the significant management time and organisational focus is required on in relation to LGR, and obviously the impact it will have potentially on the delivery of frontline services and the wider council's priorities. Officers have carefully considered the feedback, and rather than expand on the existing risk, which was more focused around elections and members continuing on beyond their 4 years, it was felt appropriate that a new strategic risk to specifically capture this issue. This provides greater transparency and allows the councils to separate, monitor and manage the risks associated with the organisation and capacity around LGR. The report also reflects on the ongoing work to strengthen the council's overall risk management arrangements, including officer and member training that has happened during June, the implementation of the recommendations arising from the recent internal audit review, and further development of risk indicators and mitigation measures. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. Comments, questions? Oh, Chris. Yeah, yes, fine, Chris.
I just want to ask one question, and that's I hope I'm looking at the right page. I think I am. That is the climate change one, because obviously we have got a series of mitigation plans in place for climate change, but actually given the current summer we're having, and how that is actually impacting all organisations, do we need to revise those? Do we need to look at it given that the reality of what in terms of particularly building mitigation? Are they sufficient?
So obviously the risks are reviewed each quarterly by the leadership team, and obviously I'm more than happy to take that forward to the next review to assess whether there is any further need to revisit the score and any of the implementations or the mitigation actions that need to be taken to address any increase in score.
I mean, given the budgetary position for the council and the actual lack of infrastructure changes that we're able to afford, I think those risks need to be much more closely evaluated, because obviously it has a huge impact on the ability of the council to carry out its daily functions if half the staff have to go home because the building's too hot. So I think we really have to kind of think that one through a bit more.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any more comments? George?
We discussing the risk register itself now. Is that what we're good? Okay, so I was just thinking, because recently there's a story where Anthropic built the Mythos AI, which broke into the NSA's stuff in like 6 hours, and that Chinese people have recently done the same sort of thing, make the same sort of thing. But it's not flagged, I don't think, as a risk in any of the cyber systems.
Risk 6, ransomware attack deletes data. You could expand that out to address Councillor Williams' point. On that point, though, the Director of IT is listed as the person responsible, but East Herts doesn't have a Director of IT, does it?
We have a shared service with Stevenage Borough Council, so the Director of IT does sit on our leadership team and he attends our leadership team meetings. So any kind of like reports kind of like into me, albeit my responsibility sits with Stevenage because they are the host of the IT service. But I can again bring that forward as part of the review period for the next meeting. What I would say is that he does come along to these meetings from time to time to provide updates around what we do in relation to cyber and obviously all IT security. And obviously, no, I think there might be something in the work program whereby he will be attended at some point. So again, he does come on a normally annual basis to provide an update of where we are. But again, there is also the quarterly board meeting between Stevenage and and East Herts, where obviously members do sit on that as well to be able to look at those potential threats.
Thank you, Brian. I think, sorry, George.
Is that something that kind of gets discussed? Is that, you know, as technology evolves fairly rapidly, the risk evolves rapidly with it, and you can look at that much more frequently and kind of expand what it says in there to kind of with it.
No, we'll do it. Yes, it's a moving feast, and obviously we do get attacked a lot, but we defend it a lot as well. So we put a lot of security and protection in place to protect our systems from any potential attacks.
Yeah, sorry, I think AI is in the work program, ONS. So, but that's another story. That's another group. Bob.
To a very small point, it's not strictly relevant, but since you mention it, Brian, in passing, how many attacks do we fend off a year? I think the public would be impressed that it's a very high number and we fend them all off, don't we?
It is a high number. I'm talking into thousands, and they are 99% are we are protected. The odd one gets in, but again, even when they get in, there's lots of security around that to stop it from actually terminating or getting into all our systems. So there is a lot of protection and a lot of cost goes into protecting all our systems.
Thank you. Any more before we take a vote on this? No. So there's a single recommendation, the 25-26 Q4 corporate risk register and actions being taken to control and mitigate risk be considered and noted. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder? Proposer, Maura, thank you very much. And a seconder at all? David. Could I have a show of hands, those in favour? That is unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Yes, the interesting one here for me. The Audit and Governance Committee Effectiveness Review 26. Brian?
Yeah, found it. Sorry. So this report presents the quarter. No, sorry, that's not right, is it? So I'm going to have to top of my head now. So as part of the internal audit report that we had last year around the effectiveness of the audit committee, one of the recommendations was around we need to do some kind of self-assessment on our effectiveness. Decision. I have completed the SIPFA toolkit around the effectiveness of audit committees. I have obviously based it on my own knowledge from being here for the last year, and obviously it's now open for members to look at, to consider, and to comment and agree, whether they agree with my scoring, or whether they feel it needs to be adjusted, and more importantly, around the actual recommendations that will come out of that process. I think there's probably a couple that we probably might want to focus more attention on. One is around separation, and obviously one of the recommendations is that people who are sitting on audit and governance shouldn't be sitting on the executive or shouldn't be sitting on ONS, Overrun Scrutiny Committee. Now, obviously, no one on A&G sits on the executive, so that's clear, and that's fine. But there are obviously some members linked with ONS and A&G. So again, it is a discussion point. I'm not saying we should have a separate process, but at least we are aware of that. And obviously, due to the small size of members we've got, it might not be possible to even go down that route. But again, as long as we've acknowledged it and we've identified it, I think that's fine. Another one is around audit committee do not have any private sessions with either external or internal auditors. So again, the recommendation is around, whether you start having those informal sessions so that you can obviously understand and obviously get first-hand information from both the external auditors and internal auditors around anything you want to discuss that maybe can be discussed more privately rather than in the public domain. And there was one other, I need to try to remember, so I can't. Have I come to it?
Well, Brian, should we take some questions?
Yeah,
And
okay.
you can, so comments and questions relating to the audit and governance effectiveness review. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I just explore that a bit further, Brian, in terms of the separation and what the potential conflict that you might feel is there? Because it does say executive, and being a new member of both committees, obviously, it piqued my interest. Are you able to go into it in a bit more detail, please?
Yeah, I think it's just to so that there's lots of independence and there's no potential crossover of any kind of potential conflict. I personally don't see it as a major issue that if you're sitting on ONS, you can't sit on A&G. I think due to the size of the organisation and number of members, it is more practical to have that situation. But I think as long as we are aware that they are sitting on both, then obviously it's been reported rather than not. But I can't personally see any real reason why you can't sit on both. I can clearly understand why you can't be on executive and then being on that, because obviously you're scrutinising yourself, where generally speaking there is no crossover between ONS and A&G work programmes. So to me, there is not a major concern. But again, it's just been highlighted as part of the sit for toolkit to be, completely independent. You obviously have that separate function away from ONS.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions? No. Okay, we'll take it to vote then. So there's two recommendations. Obviously, note and comment proposed self-assessment. A and B, confirm any actions required to ensure full compliance. But clearly, I think that goes without saying that we are feeling it's okay. So a proposer and a seconder, please, for this item. Chris proposing, thank you very much. And seconding? Tom. Yeah, Tom. Well done, Tom. Yeah. Don't know what we'd do without you today. So please, show of hands, those in favour. And that's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes. David, sorry.
A quick item of urgent business.
Urgent business? We haven't finished yet.
No, when you do.
So the Audit and Governance Work Programme, I think that following on from the beam discussion, I think that there was, by the sounds of it, a desire to discuss this again on the next September.
Well, my understanding is that the committee wants a discussion in July, and obviously we'll go away as officers to in July, so that we can then come back to audit and governance and overrule scrutiny members that wish to have that discussion. But obviously going forward, whether members are then wanting separate reports or whether they're happy with a section within the quarterly monitoring report on the beam performance. Again, I'm open to suggestions from the committee.
Certainly, thank you. Comments, Bob, and then Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Just to say, I'm sure my views are really clear by now, but I think we should definitely have this session meeting in July. And I do think we should get Beam back onto the agenda for this committee in September. Now, maybe at September we can review whether we want it to come onto the agenda for the next audit and governance. But I think almost every day counts, doesn't it? So that would be my preference, please.
Certainly, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just thinking about what Brian's alluded to there about coming forward with reports, my concern would be if those reports talk about how brilliant the sales are going, they would almost be pointless showing them to this committee. They've got to be a P&L. They've got to show the exact financial position, or I don't think members here will have transparency that they need. That would be my only concern.
Thank you. Any other comments around the programme? No? Oh, yes, sorry. So I made an announcement at the beginning of this session that the external auditor will be on the next in September because they couldn't do today. So that would be put on there. So on that basis then, we need to take a vote, 2 recommendations: approve the financial and audit work programme for 26-27, identify any training requirements, and I suppose C, to add the additional auditor report and the BEAM report. Okay. Could I please have a yeah, well, I'll propose we accept the programme. Any seconder? Bob, can I have a show of hands, please? That is carried and unanimous. Thank you very much. So, urgent items.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Jacobs, if you could maybe just sort of set out what it is that you wanted them to think about, and then the urgency. Is it something that we need to talk about in the meeting, or is it something that can be done outside? So what's the issue and what's the urgency, please?
David.
Like back on the beam discussion, I apologise for bringing up. I don't think any of us bore in mind the fact that on the 22nd of July we've got a full council. 22nd of July is almost exactly 3 weeks from today. And I'm not sure members necessarily want to come to a full council meeting to discuss beam or a combined OLS and AG meeting to discuss beam, and then the next day or the day after it's full council. I was just wondering whether we could possibly have it a 6 o'clock start, have the first hour or hour and a half to beam, and then have the rest of full council thereafter.
That would mean extraordinary, would it?
Well, the start time of council is at the chair's discretion. So I don't think it would make it an extraordinary meeting.
So how do we find out whether we can achieve that or not? We'll get back in the morning, yeah. Okay.
And just very, very briefly, the other point is slides. If we could have the beam slides.
The beam slides
as well. I know we said that for the everyone active, but the beam as well.
Certainly. Chris and then George.
Through you, Chair, hypothetically, if there was an extra council meeting, say starting at 6, you wouldn't start the second one until the first one's finished. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. It doesn't need to be a standalone issue where we can look at things really thoroughly. That's the whole purpose of having the meeting in the first place. Otherwise, we're kind of like watering down our own intent there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, George.
Basically what Chris said, but as well, I was wondering if I understood the whole thing properly. Part of the problem with the sort of public scrutinising of BEAM is that there's a bunch of confidential information. If we have it as a council meeting, then all that becomes public straight away and kind of defeats the point of it being confidential.
We'll have part 2. So
Yeah,
that's in part 2. So we have part 1 almost confidential, but
part 2 is confidential. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well,
we're nearly there, aren't we? I've got a lot of sympathy with Chris's comment just there. Not necessarily because having an audit and governance meeting immediately before a full council meeting could make for a very long evening indeed. But it doesn't, if you do it that way, you don't have any time for reflection. I think my preference, a date has to be found, but my preference would be that the audit and governance BEAM meeting would be ahead of the council meeting so that everybody has some opportunity to reflect on what is discussed and what comes up at the audit and governance meeting. If that means our audit and governance meeting might be in 2 weeks' time, I can't remember what the paternity arrangements are.
I think it was to be off. Yeah. Okay. That's noted. Yeah. Thank you, Bob. So no other urgent business. Hopefully, really urgent business. I will finish this. No, exactly. I will finish this meeting at 9:28. Thank you very much.